When you hear the word human rights, what comes to your mind? Is it any of these three pictures? If that's the case, then your brain has probably compartmentalized and psychologically distanced yourself from the issue. So it sort of made you feel and perceive that all those three pictures have nothing to do with you. But the thing with those three pictures is that they only tell one part of the story. And before they got to that point, they all had an evolution, a starting point, a place where it could not have gotten to the extreme as it is in those three photos. Hi, my name is Susan Wanjiku. I'm the founder of Wanjikuseyeke. Remember, the aim of this channel is to break down development and governance issues so that you can understand, engage, and influence the matters that affect you and I. Welcome to Wanjikuseyeke. So let's start with some housekeeping. I know I've really taken a long time between releasing the first introductory video and this one. Thank you so much for your patience. I was experiencing some technical issues, but what matters is that I'm now here. I'm so excited to be doing this at a time when citizens all over the world are demanding better from their government, and Kenya is no exception. As a Kenyan youth, obviously there's a lot at stake for me, so I'm very excited to be doing this as service to my country and service to God. So if at all you think that anyone is going to be motivated and inspired by this, make sure you share the channel and let's contribute to making our country a better place. Welcome to Wanjikuseyeke again. So I've strategically decided to start with this topic because there is no way you'll discuss development in any country without touching on human rights, and you won't be able to assess how good or bad a government is without touching on human rights, because governments don't govern stones, they don't govern walls, they govern human beings. And same to all development initiatives. Whenever we're talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, the Millennium Development Goals, and any agenda even in Kenya that the government has sought to undertake, they all revolve around human rights because, like I said, governments don't govern stones. So today I want to break down this issue of human rights. I'll give you the evolution and I'll make it more practical so that you can see how it affects you as the person watching this. So, what are human rights? Before I dive deeper into the details, human rights are those things that we are entitled to just for the mere fact that we are alive and we are human beings. So, the essence of this whole concept of human rights, which cannot be taken away from us because they're inherent, we depend on those things to survive, is that human rights ensure that we live up to our fullest potential and that we also live a life of dignity while we are still on this earth. So for example, one of the most fundamental rights is the right to live. That's the right to be alive and not to be killed or to be put in conditions or situations or circumstances that could potentially kill you. So for example, you can't enjoy education if you're not alive. You can't enjoy a good life if you're not alive. You can't enjoy security or to express yourself or to associate with people if you're not alive. I hope you get the picture. So that's the most fundamental human right, the right to be alive. So where did the human rights as we know them today come from? So in around 1945, 1946, after the Second World War, countries came together to sign what is known as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where they each adopted human rights but to different extents. They didn't all adopt the same thing. And the reason that they signed this is because they never wanted what happened in World War II to ever happen again anywhere in the world. But let's again go back to World War II. So what happened in World War II? In World War II, cities and entire countries were destroyed and property, factories, and farms were also bombed, meaning people lost their sources of livelihoods, and people were forced to go and work in the countries of the people who had captured them. There were also mass shootings and killings, and the worst of them all was what was happening in the concentration camps. People who were thought to be unworthy of life, these were the Jews, homosexuals, old people, people who believed in democracy, people with physical and mental disabilities, and prisoners of war, were killed on arrival or treated in very inhumane ways. On arrival, they were forced to strip and to shower in front of hundreds of people, then given a uniform and forced to shave their heads. This process was meant to take away any remaining dignity left, and a majority of them died either of starvation, diseases because of the horrible sanitary conditions they lived under, rape, being killed for trying to commit suicide, and being used as human experiment. In the end, a total of 60 to 75 million people died in the war, and of this figure, more than half of that were innocent civilians as opposed to soldiers. But it's not just about World War II. World War II is again just one part of the story. So it's about all the sequence of events that happened straight from World War I, then to the Great Depression, then World War II. So the entire world, and Germany was among the countries that was facing that problem. The entire world was going through a period of political and economic instability immediately after World War I. So what happened immediately after World War I? Germany was forced to sign a treaty to acknowledge that they were the ones who had started World War I, and because of that, they were to pay for the damages of World War I. They were to pay the countries that actually won World War I, and they were also supposed to lose a part of their territory. So this defeat was very humiliating to Germany, and it was sort of a bruise to their ego. And for a large part of the 1920s after that, aside from being fined and forced to compensate these other countries for the loss that they had encountered during World War I, Germany faced a period of hyperinflation, and that just meant that the prices of goods and services was rising at an extremely fast rate without any basis. Then there was a lot of unemployment because there was no demand for goods and services. So businesses were shutting down because there's no demand, and there's no point of retaining employees if people are not buying your products. Then the government had also taken a lot of debt to fund World War I. So you can see they were already in crisis. And because of this, there was a lot of fear and uncertainty in Germany as to what the future held for people in that country. And because of this, they were really looking for quick fix solutions. They needed a leader who could solve these issues very fast, because the governments that were there before had not really addressed the issues of the majority, and the economy was only working for a few people. Then came Hitler. So Hitler, how he came into power was he convinced the majority of the people and gained popularity by tapping into the fears of the people and convincing them that he was the one who was going to be able to solve the economic issues in the country. And he also told them that he was going to reverse the treaty that they had signed, saying that they were the ones who started World War I, and he promised them that he was going to reclaim the territory that they had lost because of this treaty. And because the people had lost confidence in their government, Hitler was able to get their attention because the people really wanted a quick fix to their solution. And these economic solutions never have a quick fix. But remember, all this while, Germany was still a democratic country. Then came the elites and the conservatives of Germany. So these guys were really anti-democracy, and because they're the ones who had really benefited from the government working for just a few people in the economy, they really wanted to preserve the status quo, and they were hell-bent on crushing democracy in Germany. So they're the ones who also propped and advocated for Hitler to gain power and for the Nazi party to be the ruling party in Germany, because they thought that they could control Hitler. so their interests could be maintained, and at the same time they'd be able to promote Hitler, but then that backfired on them a good one. So when the Nazi party got into power, the first order of the day was suspending the constitution, and then Hitler became the law in that country. So Germany moved from a democracy into a dictatorship. And people were also convinced, for some funny reason, that they could let go and give up their rights and freedoms in return for Hitler to fix the economy. So they were very okay when Hitler and the Nazi party suspended the constitution. So what was the role of the Nazi party and the role of other institutions in instigating things so that they got to the point that they got the extreme position of now getting to World War II? So remember, the Nazi party had an ideology of promoting German supremacy, and they did this through their laws. Number one, they made sure to deprive the Jews of their rights and freedoms and even citizenship. And for the economic institutions, they made sure to exclude the Jews from all professions. And then the Nazi party, through their parliament, made sure to suspend freedom of the press and freedom of speech, so that there was no one left now to advocate for the freedoms and the rights of the Jews. And they also used propaganda in their education to spread that ideology of theirs. That the Jews were a threat to them and their economic opportunities. Like the Jews were reducing their economic opportunities to getting jobs, or to owning property, or to having competing properly in business. So you see, basically propaganda. So before World War II, they did all this so that they could try and make the Jews relocate to other countries, so that they leave Germany for the Germans. But now, because relocating has its own costs and the procedures can be quite discouraging, and now when World War II began, it became a mission to exterminate and to remove Jews from the face of this earth. And then World War II took place. So what are human rights now in detail? Each category of human rights plays a very specific and very important role in society. First, we have the social and economic rights, which are important for our basic survival. These are things like food, housing, clothes, healthcare, a job. Then we have the legal rights that will ensure that we get justice fairly and quickly if we've been wronged or if we wrong someone. Then we have the political rights, where we can decide who we want to govern us and how we want to be governed, and we can also decide to run for a political seat. Then we have the right to access important state information, so that we can be able to hold our governments accountable for their actions based on what they've been doing, for example, with our money. We also have freedom of media and expression, so that we can create awareness on issues in the society.
Na ukiogopa jua huwezi kuwa chief. Iba hizo mamita scot free. Niibe tu kuku ntalala ndani. At least pasta nganga na washinda. Jamhuri yetu nyumba. Nchi ya kitu kidogo. Ni nchi ya watu wadogo. Ukitaka chai ewe ndugu.
Demonstrating is a right, and we are here to show that we are tired of police.
And all of these rights are based on certain principles, such that they apply to all of us, regardless of your age, your gender, your race, your religion, and among other constructs, and they should not be taken away from you. But here is where things get tricky. They're very interdependent. Each human right is dependent on another human right. So for example, depending on the religion that you have, if you're a Muslim and you're in a particular country, and you're a female Muslim, you might not be able to allow to go to school, for example. So the right to religion could affect your right to education. Or if you don't have particular skills, either through formal education or training, you might not have the skills to be able to start your own business or to actually get employed. and because of that you might not be able to again get an income. And if you don't have an income, you're not going to be able to have the basics for yourself, to be able to afford food, shelter, clothing, rent, fees if you have children, fees for yourself if you choose to further your education. So I hope you can see how they are very interdependent. So how do all these things now, these rights and freedoms, all work together now in the grand scheme of things, so that we can see a difference between developed countries and underdeveloped countries? So there's a very popular feedback group that we can see from developed countries, such that the citizens are able to access the basics, and because they're able to access the basics, then they're able to either get employed or start their own businesses. And if they're able to start their own businesses, again, they're able to afford the same to their families, and they're also able to save and invest. And again, because of that, because of the self-esteem and the dignity that they have, they are also now more confident to hold their government accountable. And they can do this either by petitions or protests or picketing or demonstrating, or even just lobbying in parliament, challenging some of the decisions that their leaders make. And when they do this, they hold their government accountable, then their governments make better decisions. And when they make better decisions, because the citizens ndio wako kwa ground, the economy now has a chance to grow and become better for a majority of the people. Then the loop continues. And what we see for underdeveloped countries is that people are not able to access the basics. If they're not able to access the basics, then they're not able to either start their own businesses or be employed. If they're not able to do that, again, savings and investments are low, and also they're not able to fend for themselves. If they're not able to fend for themselves, they're not courageous enough to stand up against the government if the government is doing the wrong thing. And even if they're courageous enough, their governments will suppress their freedom of expression either by tear gassing them during protests or police brutality. And because of that, their needs will be ignored by the leaders, and if they're ignored, that means there's a breakdown in information, a breakdown in the natural sequence of how economies work. And because of that, an economy continues deteriorating and becomes worse and worse, and then the cycle for underdevelopment goes on and on. So I hope you can now see the connection of all this. I hope it's made sense now, and you can see how they all affect each other. None is more prominent than the other. I hope by now it's clear that human rights si vitu za wazungu, and human rights si vitu zenye activists wanalipanga kupiga kelele about. Human rights is actually what level of freedom are we able to enjoy while living in a particular country. So if it's not yet clear, you can examine yourself as a person watching this and ask yourself, what freedoms and rights are you enjoying? Are you lucky enough to be employed or to have started your own business, and that means you have an income? And if you have an income, that also means you can be able to take care of your family, and you can be able to pay for their education if you have any kids, or you can further your education if you wanted. That you live in a clean and safe and secure environment, that you can be a Christian or a Muslim without being killed, that you can associate with Otieno or Wanjiku or Moha without being killed. Those are some of the things that we really take for granted, and that's why we have compartmentalized and psychologically distanced ourselves from the concept of human rights, as I explained in the introduction. So we'll touch on that in other videos. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope I've debunked human rights to the best of my ability. I hope you've understood it better. If you have, make sure you comment, make sure you share with someone who will also learn from this, and make sure you be inspired to do something. This is also me exercising my right and freedom to express myself, to educate people on these things so that they can also understand, engage, and influence. Cheers, and see you in the next video.